My sister announced her engagement at my birthday party. Not just any announcement, she had my parents cut my cake to reveal her ring hidden inside while my brother filmed it for social media. 300 guests cheered for her as I stood there frosting on my dress, realizing I had been nothing more than a prop in her perfect moment. That night, scrolling through the posts, I discovered something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we dive into this family betrayal that changed everything I want to know, where are you watching from today? If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, or experienced that gut-wrenching moment when you realize people you trusted have been playing a completely different game, hit that like button because this story is going to take us on a wild ride. Make sure to subscribe because family karma stories like this one prove that sometimes the universe has the most poetic sense of justice. My name is Madison, and for 28 years, I believed I was the problem child in the Parker family. While my sister Victoria glided through life collecting achievements like trophies, I struggled through college, bounced between jobs, and constantly heard about my shortcomings during every family dinner. My parents, Robert and Linda Parker, never missed an opportunity to compare us, always with Victoria coming out as the golden daughter. The birthday party incident should have been my breaking point, but I was so conditioned to accept secondary status that I actually felt guilty for being upset. Victoria had looked radiant, announcing her engagement to Marcus, a successful investment banker, while I stood there in my discount dress feeling like an extra in someone else's movie. But that night, unable to sleep, I did what any millennial does when processing trauma. I doom-scrolled social media. That was when I saw Marcus posting from what looked like a luxury vacation in the Bahamas tagged just 2 weeks earlier. The weird thing was, Victoria had told everyone she was visiting our grandmother during that exact time period. Grandmother Dorothy lived in a nursing home in Ohio, definitely not known for crystal-clear turquoise waters and five-star resorts. Curious and unable to shake the feeling something was off, I dug deeper. Victoria had been posting photos from the nursing home during those same dates, but something about the lighting seemed wrong. The timestamps showed her posting about grandmother's condition at the exact times Marcus was posting sunset cocktail photos from Nassau. Then I found the real smoking gun. In one of Marcus' background shots, I could clearly see Victoria reflection in a mirror wearing a bikini and holding the same cocktail. They had been together in the Bahamas while she told our family she was dutifully caring for grandmother. This discovery led me down a rabbit hole that would shatter everything. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored. Why did Victoria always have expensive designer items despite claiming her marketing job barely paid the bills? How was she able to afford the down payment on her downtown condo when I could barely make rent on my studio apartment? I remembered overhearing a phone conversation where she mentioned needing to transfer funds before the quarterly review. At the time, I thought she was talking about her savings account. Now, with fresh eyes, I realized she might be discussing something far more serious. My investigation skills, honed from years of freelance research work, kicked into high gear. I created a timeline of Victoria's social media posts, cross-referenced them with family events, and started noticing patterns. Every time there was a family financial crisis, dad business struggling, mom medical bills, Victoria would suddenly have a solution. She always positioned herself as the savvy daughter who made smart investments. But the most chilling discovery came when I remembered the family trust fund. Our grandfather had left a substantial inheritance to be managed by the eldest child until all grandchildren reached 30. Victoria, being 2 years older, had been managing the trust for the past 3 years. According to the paperwork I found in Dad's home office, the trust should have been worth nearly $500,000 by now. I decided to do something I had never done before. I questioned Victoria directly. During what I thought would be a casual coffee meeting, I mentioned that I was excited about accessing my portion of the trust fund when I turned 30 in 2 years. The look that flashed across her face, pure panic, told me everything I needed to know. She quickly recovered, laughing nervously and telling me that the trust had been invested in a long-term fund that would not mature for several more years. She used financial jargon I did not understand, but her body language screamed deception. She kept touching her necklace, a tell I remembered from childhood, when she would lie about breaking mom vases or eating dad-hidden candy. That evening, I called the law firm that had originally set up the trust. After being transferred multiple times and explaining my relationship to the account, a sympathetic paralegal confirmed my worst suspicions. There had been numerous withdrawals over the past 18 months, all authorized by the primary trustee, Victoria. The trust fund, which should have been earning interest and growing, had been systematically drained. Large withdrawals coincided perfectly with Victoria Luxury purchases her condo down payment and what I now realized were funding her lavish lifestyle with Marcus. But the betrayal went even deeper. I discovered that Victoria had been intercepting bank statements and trust fund communications that should have been copied to all beneficiaries. She had been forging documents and providing falsified reports to our parents, who believed their financial planner daughter had everything under control. The most heartbreaking realization was that our parents' recent financial struggles, dad declining business, mom delayed medical procedures, could have been alleviated with trust fund money that was rightfully available. Instead, Victoria had been hoarding resources while watching our family suffer. As I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by printed bank statements and legal documents, I realized that my entire family dynamic had been built on lies. Victoria was not the responsible, successful daughter we all believed her to be. She was a thief who had been systematically stealing from her own family while maintaining a facade of superiority. The question now was not whether to expose her, but how to do it in a way that would ensure justice and prevent her from disappearing with whatever remained of our inheritance. I needed a plan, allies, and ironclad evidence that could not be disputed or explained away. For the first time in my life, I was not going to be the passive, accommodating daughter who accepted whatever scraps the family threw my way. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had never experienced before. 28 years of feeling inferior, of accepting that I was somehow less worthy than Victoria, suddenly made perfect sense. It was not that I was inadequate. It was that I had been systematically gaslit by someone who was stealing from our family and needed a scapegoat to deflect attention from her crimes. My first step was gathering irrefutable evidence. I spent the weekend creating a comprehensive dossier that would make any prosecutor proud. Bank statements showing the trust fund depletion screenshots of Victoria's social media posts that contradicted her claimed whereabouts, credit card statements I obtained through a family friend who worked at the bank, and most importantly, the original trust documents that clearly outlined how the money should have been managed. But I knew that simply presenting facts to my family would not be enough. Victoria had spent years cultivating her image as the responsible, trustworthy daughter. She had positioned herself as the family financial expert, and my parents trusted her implicitly. I needed to expose her in a way that would be so undeniable that even her most loyal supporters could not rationalize it away. The opportunity presented itself when Victoria announced that she wanted to host an early Thanksgiving dinner to celebrate her engagement with Marcus' extended family. She had specifically requested that everyone bring their most treasured family photos and mementos to create a memory display that would showcase our family legacy for Marcus relatives. This was perfect. Victoria loved being the center of attention, loved showing off her perfect life and perfect relationship. She would never suspect that her own celebration would become the venue for her downfall. I spent 2 weeks preparing for what I privately called Operation Family Truth. I contacted every family member who would be attending ostensibly to coordinate the memory display, but really to plant seeds of curiosity about family finances. I asked innocent questions about whether anyone had received their annual trust fund statements mentioned, that I was confused about some financial documents I had found, and generally created an atmosphere where people would be primed to pay attention to financial discussions. The masterstroke was involving our cousin Derek, who worked as a forensic accountant. I presented him with my evidence under the guise of asking for advice about managing my portion of the trust fund. Derek's reaction was immediate and explosive. He confirmed that what Victoria had done was not just unethical. It was criminal embezzlement that could result in felony charges. Derek agreed to attend the dinner and provide professional validation of my findings if needed. Having a neutral family member with financial expertise on my side was crucial for credibility. I also reached out to Aunt Margaret, our grandmother's sister, who had always been suspicious of Victoria's sudden wealth. Margaret had made several comments over the years about how Victoria's lifestyle seemed inconsistent with her claimed income, But no one had taken her seriously because Margaret was often dismissed as the family gossip. Turns out Margaret observations were not gossip. They were the keen insights of someone who actually paid attention to details. She had been documenting inconsistencies for months, creating her own informal investigation. When I shared my findings with her, we realized we had been working parallel cases against the same suspect. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at my parents' house with 23 family members expected to attend. Victoria had spent weeks planning every detail from the centerpieces to the playlist, determined to present herself as the perfect hostess for her future in-laws. I arrived early, ostensibly to help with preparations, but really to position myself strategically for what was about to unfold. Victoria was in her element, directing everyone like a wedding planner, making sure every detail reflected her sophisticated taste and organizational skills. Marcus' family seemed lovely, which made what I was about to do even more difficult. They did not deserve to be caught in the crossfire of family drama, but they also deserved to know exactly who they were welcoming into their family. During the cocktail hour, while Victoria was busy playing the perfect hostess, I quietly distributed copies of key financial documents to Derek, Aunt Margaret, and my parents. I did not explain what they were looking at, just suggested they might find the information interesting and that we could discuss it later. The dinner itself was torture. Victoria gave a beautiful speech about family legacy, about how grateful she was to have such a supportive and loving family, about how excited she was to merge our family traditions with Marcus family values. She talked about responsibility trust and the importance of taking care of each other. Every word felt like a knife, knowing what I knew about how she had been systematically betraying that trust while positioning herself as the family caretaker. After dinner, when Victoria suggested we share stories around the memory display she had created, I knew it was time. I stood up, holding a folder that contained everything Victoria thought she had hidden successfully. Before we share memories, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, I think we need to address some current family business that affects everyone here. Victoria's face immediately changed. The confident, gracious hostess expression was replaced by something I had never seen before. Genuine fear. Madison, this is not really the time or place for serious discussions, she said, trying to maintain control of the situation. Actually, Victoria, this is exactly the time and place. You chose to host this dinner to celebrate trust and family values with Marcus' family present. It seems appropriate that his family knows exactly what kind of trust and values you actually represent. The room went completely silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. I opened the folder and began presenting the evidence piece by piece. Bank statements showing the trust fund depletion. Screenshots of her luxury vacation posts coinciding with claimed visits to grandmother. Credit card statements revealing purchases far beyond her claimed income. Victoria initially tried to interrupt to explain to redirect attention back to the celebration. But as I continued presenting evidence, her protests became weaker and less convincing. The moment that broke everything was when Derek stood up and confirmed that what I was presenting constituted clear evidence of embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. Hearing the word embezzlement spoken by a professional in front of the entire family, including Marcus' family, was like a bomb exploding in the room. Victoria finally stopped trying to maintain her composure. The mask fell completely, and for the first time in our lives, our family saw her as she really was. Not the golden daughter, but a person who had stolen from her own family while watching them struggle financially. Marcus looked absolutely devastated. His family seemed mortified to be witnessing such an intimate family crisis. My parents sat in stunned silence trying to process how their trusted daughter had betrayed them so completely. But the most important moment was when my dad, who had always favored Victoria, looked directly at me and said, "Why did not you come to us sooner? For the first time in my life, I was not the problem. I was not the one who needed to apologize or make excuses. I was the one who had uncovered the truth and had the courage to speak it even when it was devastating to hear." The aftermath of the dinner was immediate and explosive. Marcus' family left within minutes of my revelation, with Marcus pulling Victoria aside for a heated conversation that ended with her throwing her engagement ring across the room. The sound of it hitting the hardwood floor was like a starting gun for the chaos that followed. My parents went into crisis management mode, but for the first time in family memory, they were not trying to protect Victoria. Dad immediately called our family lawyer, while Mom started calculating how much money they had lost due to Victoria deception. The financial impact was staggering. They had taken out a second mortgage on their house to cover medical bills that could have been paid from the trust fund Victoria had stolen. Over the next week, I found myself in an unfamiliar position. The family member everyone was calling for updates and guidance. Derek had recommended we immediately freeze all remaining trust assets and begin formal legal proceedings. Aunt Margaret was documenting every instance of Victoria financial deception she could remember. Even my normally passive Uncle James was demanding a full forensic audit, but Victoria was not going quietly. Within 3 days of the dinner, I started receiving threatening text messages. She accused me of destroying the family out of jealousy, claimed that her management of the trust had actually saved money, and threatened to reveal embarrassing secrets about me if I continued pursuing the matter. The secrets she threatened to reveal were pathetic. The fact that I had failed organic chemistry twice in college, that I had once been arrested for underage drinking, that I had struggled with depression after my last breakup. These were things I had already shared with family members who cared about me. Her threats only confirmed how desperate she had become. More concerning were the reports from other family members that Victoria was reaching out to them individually, trying to rebuild alliances and create alternative narratives about what had happened. She told some relatives that I had misunderstood the financial documents, told others that the trust fund situation was more complicated than I realized, and tried to position herself as the victim of my vindictive campaign. This was when I learned one of the most important lessons about family dynamics. Exposing the truth is only the beginning of the battle. The real fight comes when the exposed person starts trying to rebuild their image and discredit their accusers. Fortunately, I was no longer fighting alone. Derek had introduced me to Sarah Williams, a family law attorney who specialized in trust fund disputes. Sarah was immediately interested in the case, both because the evidence was so clear-cut and because she had seen similar patterns of sibling financial abuse that often went unreported. Sarah explained that what Victoria had done was not just morally wrong, but legally actionable. The systematic withdrawal of trust funds for personal use, the falsified reports to beneficiaries, and the breach of fiduciary duty could result in both criminal charges and civil liability. More importantly, we could potentially recover the stolen money through asset seizure and forced restitution. But Sarah also warned me that family legal battles can be particularly nasty because they involve people who know your vulnerabilities intimately. Victoria would likely escalate her attacks on my credibility and character, and I needed to be prepared for things to get much worse before they got better. The alliance-building phase became crucial for both legal and emotional survival. Derek became my primary advisor on financial matters, helping me understand the full scope of what Victoria had stolen and how to document it properly for legal proceedings. Aunt Margaret served as the family historian, providing context and corroborating evidence for patterns of behavior that went back years. Most importantly, I connected with my cousin Jennifer, who lived across the country and had always been somewhat outside the immediate family dynamics. Jennifer had her own successful career as a medical researcher and was not invested in maintaining the family status quo that had protected Victoria for so long. Jennifer brought a valuable outside perspective and emotional support that I desperately needed. She helped me realize that my years of feeling inadequate were not based on actual personal failings, but on a deliberately constructed family narrative designed to keep me from questioning Victoria's authority and competence. Through Jennifer's encouragement, I also started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. Dr. Patricia Rodriguez helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of psychological manipulation called scapegoating, where one family member is systematically blamed for problems, while another family member benefits from the deflected attention. Dr. Rodriguez also helped me prepare for what she warned would be an escalation in Victoria's attempts to discredit me. People who have been systematically deceiving their families often become desperate when exposed and will use increasingly extreme tactics to regain control of the narrative. She was absolutely right. 3 weeks after the dinner confrontation, Victoria made her most calculated move yet. She called my parents and told them she had discovered evidence that I had been stealing money from their personal accounts for years. She claimed to have bank statements and receipts proving that I had been forging checks and making unauthorized withdrawals. The accusation was completely false, but it was designed to create doubt about my credibility and motivation for exposing her crimes. If my parents believed that I was also stealing from them, then my accusations against Victoria would seem like projection rather than legitimate whistleblowing. This was the moment when I realized that Victoria was not just a thief. She was someone who would systematically destroy family relationships to protect herself. She was willing to permanently damage my relationship with our parents rather than accept responsibility for what she had done. Fortunately, my newly assembled alliance was prepared for exactly this kind of escalation. Derek immediately offered to conduct a complete audit of my parents' accounts to prove that Victoria accusations were baseless. Sarah advised documenting every communication from Victoria as potential evidence of witness intimidation and harassment. Most importantly, Jennifer flew out from Seattle to provide moral support during what was becoming the most challenging period of my life. Having someone who believed in me unconditionally, who was not invested in the existing family dynamics, made all the difference in maintaining my resolve. The battle lines were now clearly drawn. On one side was Victoria, increasingly isolated but still dangerous in her desperation to avoid consequences. On the other side was a growing coalition of family members and professionals who were committed to ensuring that justice was served and that the pattern of financial abuse was permanently stopped. But I was about to learn that even the strongest alliances can be tested when the stakes get high enough, and that Victoria had one more devastating card to play that would temporarily shatter everything I thought I had built. Just when I thought our coalition was unbreakable, Derek dropped a bombshell that nearly destroyed everything. 2 days after Victoria made her false accusations against me, he called requesting an urgent meeting. His voice sounded strained, unlike the confident professional who had been supporting my case. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from family territory. Derek looked exhausted, and I immediately knew something was seriously wrong. He slid a manila envelope across the table with trembling hands. "Madison, I need to show you something that changes everything," he said, unable to meet my eyes. Inside the envelope were bank statements and financial documents I had never seen before. According to these papers, there had been additional transfers from the trust fund that predated Victoria management by several years. The documents showed systematic withdrawals that coincided with my college tuition payments, apartment deposits, and even my car purchase. "Derek, what is this?" "These documents show transactions from when I was barely 18. Victoria wasn't even managing the trust then." His response hit me like a physical blow. "Madison, these records show that you've been accessing trust funds inappropriately for almost 10 years. Victoria discovered them during her audit and has been trying to protect you by covering the shortfalls with her own money." The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. Everything I thought I knew was crumbling. "That's impossible. I never had access to the trust fund. I didn't even know it existed until 2 years ago." Derek pulled out more documents. What appeared to be authorization forms with my signature withdrawal requests dated back to my freshman year of college, even copies of deposit slips showing trust fund money going into my personal accounts. "I've been analyzing these for 3 days, Madison. The signatures match the amounts correspond to your major expenses, and the timeline fits perfectly with your financial needs during college and afterward. Victoria has been quietly replacing money you took using her own savings and investment returns." I stared at the documents, my mind racing. The signatures did look like mine, though I had no memory of ever signing such papers. The amounts were eerily accurate, exactly what I had needed for tuition, exactly what my security deposit had been, exactly what I had paid for my used Honda. "Derek, I swear to you, I never signed these documents. I never took money from the trust fund. Someone is setting me up." But Derek's expression had changed completely. The supportive cousin who had been my strongest ally was now looking at me with disappointment and suspicion. "Madison, I want to believe you, but the evidence is overwhelming. These aren't photocopies or digital files that could be manipulated. These are original documents from the bank's secure records." The betrayal was devastating, but what happened next was even worse. Derek admitted that he had already shared these findings with Sarah Williams, our family attorney, and that she was reconsidering representing me. He had also spoken with my parents, who were now questioning whether my accusations against Victoria were actually elaborate deflection tactics. Victoria wants to handle this quietly, Derek continued. She's willing to forgive the money you took and not pursue legal action, but she needs you to stop making false accusations about her management of the trust. She's prepared to present evidence of your withdrawals to the entire family if you continue this campaign against her. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process how completely the situation had reversed. 24 hours earlier, I had been the whistleblower with ironclad evidence. Now I was being positioned as the actual thief caught in my own web of deception. The worst part was Derek's transformation from ally to adversary. He had been my strongest supporter, the professional whose expertise gave credibility to my claims. Having him present evidence against me was infinitely more devastating than if Victoria had done it herself. As I walked home from the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with messages from other family members. Aunt Margaret wanted to meet urgently. Jennifer was flying back from Seattle because she had heard disturbing news about new evidence. Even my parents had left a voicemail asking me to come over that evening for a serious conversation. Victoria had played her masterpiece. She had not just discredited me, she had turned my own investigation tactics against me using forged documents and manufactured evidence to paint me as the true villain in our family drama. The accusation was so perfectly constructed that even people who loved me were starting to doubt my version of events. That evening, sitting in my parents' living room with the entire family present, Victoria made her final play for total victory. She presented her evidence with the same calm professionalism I had used just weeks earlier. She explained how she had discovered my unauthorized access to the trust fund, how she had been quietly covering my theft to protect the family from scandal, and how my recent accusations were clearly an attempt to deflect blame when I realized I was about to be exposed. The performance was masterful. Victoria positioned herself as the protective older sister who had been sacrificing her own financial security to cover for my mistakes. She even managed to make herself cry, while explaining how difficult it had been to watch me struggle with what she now realized was a serious problem with financial responsibility and truthfulness. My parents' reaction was exactly what Victoria had orchestrated. Dad, who had just begun to see me as responsible and trustworthy, was back to looking at me with disappointment. Mom was asking gentle questions about whether I needed help with gambling or substance abuse problems that might explain my financial desperation. Even worse, some family members who had initially supported me were now openly questioning my motives. Uncle James suggested that perhaps I needed professional help for what might be a serious psychological issue involving lying and theft. Aunt Margaret, who had been such a strong ally, was now studying me with confused suspicion. The only person who remained completely in my corner was Jennifer, but even she seemed shaken by the evidence Victoria had presented. "Madison, I know you and this doesn't make sense," she said after the meeting. "But those documents are pretty convincing. Is there any possibility that you accessed money without realizing it was from the trust fund?" That night, lying awake in my apartment, I faced the possibility that Victoria had actually won. She had not just escaped consequences for her theft. She had successfully reframed the entire situation so that I was now the suspected criminal. My reputation within the family was destroyed, my credibility was shattered, and I was facing the possibility of being permanently estranged from people I loved. But something about the whole situation bothered me. The documents Derek had shown me were too perfect, too convenient. Victoria had supposedly discovered evidence of my theft just days after I exposed her crimes. The timing was suspiciously convenient for someone who had spent years planning and executing financial deception. More importantly, I knew with absolute certainty that I had never signed those authorization forms or made those withdrawals, which meant that Victoria had not just stolen money. She had committed an additional crime by forging documents and manufacturing evidence to frame me for her own crimes. The question was whether I could prove it before she succeeded in completely destroying my relationships with everyone I cared about. Salvation came from the most unexpected source: Marcus, Victoria's former fiancé. 3 days after the devastating family meeting where I had been positioned as the real thief, I received a text message from an unknown number. Madison, this is Marcus. We need to talk. Victoria made a serious mistake, and I have information you need to see. I was initially suspicious. Was this another trap Victoria had orchestrated? But something in the tone of the message felt genuine, and I was desperate enough to take the risk. We agreed to meet at a restaurant across town somewhere neither of us would accidentally encounter family members. Marcus looked terrible. The confident investment banker who had been planning a wedding just weeks earlier was clearly struggling with sleepless nights and emotional devastation. But he also carried himself with the determination of someone who had made a difficult decision and was committed to seeing it through. Madison, I need you to know that I believed Victoria completely until 2 days ago, he began. Even after your revelation at the dinner, I thought maybe you were jealous or mentally unstable. The evidence she showed about your supposed theft seemed convincing. He pulled out his laptop and opened a folder labeled Victoria Evidence. Inside were screenshots, documents, and recordings that would change everything. The problem is, Victoria forgot that we've been living together for 8 months. She forgot that I work in financial fraud detection, and she definitely forgot that I have access to document analysis software that can detect forgeries. The first piece of evidence was devastating. Marcus had found the original authorization forms on Victoria's laptop, the real ones she had used to create the forgeries that implicated me. The metadata showed they had been created using Photoshop just days after our confrontation dinner. She had taken legitimate bank documents, digitally altered them to change dates and amounts, and even practiced forging my signature using samples from family birthday cards and Christmas gifts. She spent hours perfecting your signature, Marcus explained, showing me multiple practice sheets. I found these in her desk drawer. She was so focused on making the forgeries perfect that she didn't think about digital forensics. But the evidence went deeper than just document forgery. Marcus had been recording conversations with Victoria without her knowledge initially because he was trying to understand whether she was genuinely innocent or actually guilty of the crimes I had accused her of. The recordings were horrifying. In one conversation, Victoria explicitly described her strategy for neutralizing Madison's threat by manufacturing evidence that would destroy my credibility. In another, she discussed her plan to gradually transfer remaining trust fund assets to accounts I couldn't trace before anyone realized how much money was actually missing. Most damning was a phone conversation where Victoria spoke with someone she called Tony about creating additional false documents that would make the case against me even stronger. She discussed paying for professional document forgery services and even considered fabricating evidence that I had gambling debts or drug problems that would explain my alleged financial desperation. Madison, your sister isn't just a thief, Marcus said quietly. She's a sociopath who was willing to destroy your life completely to avoid taking responsibility for her crimes. If I hadn't found this evidence, she would have succeeded in framing you for felonies you never committed. The revelation was both vindicating and terrifying. I had been right about Victoria's theft, but I had vastly underestimated her willingness to escalate her crimes to avoid consequences. She was not just stealing money. She was actively working to send me to prison for crimes she had committed. Marcus explained that his decision to come forward was not just about justice, but about self-preservation. I realized that someone who could systematically steal from her own family and then frame her sister for the crimes wouldn't hesitate to destroy me if I ever became inconvenient. I couldn't marry someone capable of that level of deception and manipulation. Together, we developed a plan to present this new evidence in a way that would be impossible for Victoria to counter or explain away. Marcus had already made copies of all evidence and stored them in multiple secure locations. He had also contacted his own attorney who specialized in white-collar crime to ensure that our approach would be legally sound. The first step was bringing Derek back to our side. Despite his betrayal, I understood that he had been manipulated by expertly forged documents. When Marcus presented the forgery evidence to him, Derek's reaction was immediate and explosive. As a forensic accountant, he was mortified that he had been deceived by fake documents, and he was furious about being used as an unwitting weapon against me. Derek's professional reputation was now on the line. He had inadvertently provided credibility to forged documents which could damage his career if it became public knowledge. This gave him a powerful incentive to help us expose Victoria's crimes completely and ensure that the truth was unambiguously established. Next, we brought Sarah Williams, our family attorney, into the expanded coalition. Sarah's initial reaction was to question why Marcus was suddenly producing evidence that contradicted what Derek had shown her earlier. But when she examined the digital forensics analysis and heard the recorded conversations, her legal instincts kicked in immediately. "This is far beyond simple embezzlement," Sarah explained. "Document forgery, witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit fraud. Victoria has committed multiple felonies in her attempt to frame Madison. This case has gone from a family dispute to a serious criminal matter." Sarah recommended that we immediately contact law enforcement rather than trying to handle the situation through family channels. Victoria's crimes were now too serious and too extensive for internal family justice. She needed to face actual legal consequences that would prevent her from victimizing anyone else. But before we involved law enforcement, we decided to give my parents one final opportunity to understand the complete truth. Jennifer had remained my strongest family supporter throughout the ordeal, and she agreed to help organize a meeting where we could present the new evidence without Victoria's presence or interference. The meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday at Jennifer's hotel room neutral territory, where everyone could speak freely. My parents, Derek, Aunt Margaret, Uncle James, and several other family members would attend. Marcus would present the digital forensics evidence, Derek would explain how he had been deceived by forged documents, and I would finally have the opportunity to clear my name completely. As we prepared for what would hopefully be the final family confrontation, I realized that Victoria's escalation had actually ensured her complete downfall. If she had simply admitted to stealing from the trust fund and worked out a repayment plan, she might have faced family disappointment but avoided serious legal consequences. Instead, her attempts to destroy me had added multiple additional crimes to her record. The document forgery alone carried potential prison time, and the systematic nature of her deception demonstrated a pattern of behavior that prosecutors love to present to juries. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuine hope that justice would be served and that my family would finally understand the complete truth about who Victoria really was versus who they had believed her to be. Sunday's meeting marked the complete collapse of Victoria's carefully constructed facade. When Marcus presented the digital forensics evidence showing how she had forged documents to frame me, the reaction was swift and definitive. My parents, who had spent their entire lives defending their golden daughter, finally saw her for who she truly was. A calculating criminal who had stolen from her own family and then attempted to destroy her sister to avoid consequences. Dad's reaction was perhaps the most powerful moment of the entire ordeal. This man who had always favored Victoria, who had consistently questioned my decisions and achievements, looked directly at me and said, "Madison, I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express. We failed you as parents and Victoria betrayed you as a sister. I am so sorry." Mom's response was even more emotional. She had always prided herself on knowing her daughters completely, and realizing how thoroughly Victoria had deceived her was devastating, but her primary concern was ensuring that I knew how much they loved me and how proud they were of my courage in exposing the truth. Derek was instrumental in explaining the legal implications to family members who did not fully understand the severity of Victoria's crimes. The document forgery alone constituted multiple felonies, and the systematic nature of her theft and deception demonstrated criminal sophistication that prosecutors would not treat leniently. Within days of our family meeting, Sarah Williams had coordinated with law enforcement to begin formal criminal proceedings. The evidence was so overwhelming that Victoria's attorney immediately began discussing plea bargain options rather than mounting a defense. She was facing potential prison time, substantial restitution requirements, and permanent criminal record. But the legal consequences were only part of Victoria's downfall. The family and social consequences were equally devastating. Marcus had shared information about Victoria's crimes with his family and social circle, ensuring that her reputation in their shared community was completely destroyed. She had lost her job when her employer learned about the criminal charges, as financial crimes made her unemployable in any position involving trust or money management. Most significantly, Victoria had permanently severed her relationships with every family member who mattered. Even relatives who had initially been sympathetic to her situation were appalled by the evidence of document forgery and her attempts to frame me for crimes I had not committed. The financial recovery process was complex but successful. Asset seizure orders allowed us to recover most of the stolen money from Victoria's accounts, and the court ordered full restitution for the remainder. The trust fund was restored to its proper value plus interest and penalties that Victoria was required to pay from her future earnings. My parents were able to reverse the second mortgage they had taken on their house. Mom was able to get the medical procedures she had delayed, and Dad's business received the capital infusion it needed to recover from recent struggles. The financial relief was enormous, but the emotional healing would take much longer. For me personally, the experience was transformative in ways I had never expected. 28 years of feeling inadequate and inferior had been replaced by a clear understanding of my own worth and capabilities. I had successfully uncovered complex financial crimes, built coalitions of allies, and persevered through devastating attempts to destroy my credibility. The therapy sessions with Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that my years of feeling like the problem child were not based on actual personal failings, but on a deliberately constructed family dynamic that served Victoria's interests. Scapegoating me had allowed her to operate without scrutiny while positioning herself as the responsible, trustworthy daughter. Jennifer became more than just a supportive cousin. She became the sister I had always wished I had. Our relationship deepened during the crisis, and she helped me understand that chosen family can be just as important as biological family. Her unwavering belief in me during the darkest moments had been crucial for my emotional survival. Marcus also became an unexpected friend. His decision to come forward with evidence despite the personal cost demonstrated integrity that I deeply respected. He often told me that exposing Victoria's crimes had saved him from making the biggest mistake of his life by marrying someone capable of such systematic deception. The most important long-term consequence was the complete transformation of my relationship with my parents. For the first time in my life, they saw me as competent, trustworthy, and strong. The daughter they had always viewed as struggling was actually the daughter who had the courage to expose difficult truths and fight for justice. 6 months after Victoria's conviction, I received a job offer that perfectly reflected my new understanding of my own capabilities. A law firm that specialized in financial crime investigations wanted to hire me based on my work uncovering Victoria's embezzlement scheme. They were impressed by my investigative skills, attention to detail, and persistence in pursuing justice despite significant personal cost. Victoria herself became a cautionary tale about how greed and narcissism can destroy not just financial security, but entire family systems. Her attempts to avoid responsibility for relatively minor crimes had escalated into serious felonies that carried much harsher consequences. If she had simply admitted her mistakes and worked to make amends, she might have preserved some family relationships and avoided prison time. The experience taught me that family loyalty cannot be unconditional when it enables criminal behavior. Sometimes loving someone means refusing to protect them from the consequences of their choices. My willingness to expose Victoria's crimes was actually an act of love, for my parents, for other family members who were being harmed, and even for Victoria herself, who needed to face reality about her behavior. As I reflect on this entire experience, I am struck by how completely my life has changed. The sister who once made me feel invisible is now the one who has disappeared from our family completely. The parents who once questioned my every decision now seek my advice on important matters. The cousin who temporarily betrayed me has become one of my strongest supporters. Most importantly, I learned that my worth was never determined by my position in dysfunctional family dynamics. I had always been capable, intelligent, and strong. I just needed circumstances that allowed those qualities to emerge and be recognized. This story proves that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can lead to the most powerful transformations. When someone tries to destroy you, they often end up revealing your true strength. When someone tries to steal your future, they often end up giving you the motivation to create something better than you had ever imagined possible. I want to hear from everyone watching. Have you ever experienced a moment when family betrayal actually freed you to become who you were meant to be? Have you discovered that the people who tried to hold you back were actually the ones who pushed you toward your greatest growth? Share your own family karma stories in the comments below, because I believe these experiences connect us all. If this story resonated with your own journey of discovering your worth despite family dynamics that tried to diminish you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that family loyalty should never require accepting abuse or injustice. Thank you for allowing me to share this transformative chapter of my life with you, and remember that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they really are, because that knowledge can set you free to become exactly who you are meant to be.